Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next Foreman community demo. Your host, Ken Gilvin here, as always. Well, almost always. I'm back now, though. It's fine. So demo 48. Wow, we're into August. It's like, where did the year go? I have no idea. We've got probably quite a short demo for you today. I'm going to use some of the space at the end for a bit of an open discussion. So if you're interested in talking about documentation and how we can improve our docs, then I hang around because I'm going to try and get an impromptu panel going on that. But first, we'll have the demo proper. So the usual comments, if you want to join in, Freenode IRC or YouTube live chat, you can ask your questions there. I will try and pick those up and relay them to the appropriate people. Do remember to increase the quality of the stream if it's defaulted to some low setting, which it seems to do with depressing regularity. And then you'll be able to see all of the text from the presenters. So what have we got to talk about this week? So first things, release candidates, lots of release candidates to talk about, and releases in general. We're going to talk a little bit about Docker. We're going to talk about some internal code changes, and as I mentioned, I'd like to talk a little bit about our documentation structure as well. Talking about release candidates, 1.19 RC1 has been out for a little while, so if you're not already aware of that and you're interested in helping us test the next release, please do go and grab that, or if you're not in quite so much of a hurry, I believe our release candidate 2 is targeted for early next week. Don't hold us to that, provisional dates, but that's the theory anyway. So as always, we'd love your help testing these things. We can't do what we do without all the testing that the community provides. So we're really, really grateful for any feedback you can give us. We are running a test week like we did with 1.18. We're running a test week, but it didn't get quite the promotion it probably should have due to various factors. So I'm not sure anybody actually saw the fact that we're running a test week. But if you're interested and you need a little guidance, then go and check out the thread that I've linked there in the development category, and that's got a list of scenarios in there that we're interested in checking that work. So if any of those scenarios match your particular workflow, then please do spin up the release candidate and check that the way you do things works and that you can check off that particular scenario. Likewise, there is also a release candidate out for Catella 3.8. So if you're a Catella user, again, we would like your feedback on that, right? It's all the same comments apply. We'd love to hear from you about your experiences with that. Oh, one last thing as well is, I think you guys probably already know, I think I mentioned it in the last demo, but since it's still fairly fresh, 1.18 is out as well, 0. And you'll note these are quite close together. We're kind of trying to just make a little bit of time back. We slipped in our release schedules last year. Over the last year, things have slipped a little bit. And so we're just trying to get back on track and get our processes up to date and learn the lessons from the last year. So yeah, it's a little bit close together than usual, but that's not, it's not ridiculous. So last week we had the Foreman birthday party hosted by our friends at ATIX, and if you want to know more about how that went down, then there's a blog post on our blog about that, or you can find it in the blog category on the Foreman, on the forum. Oh man, I do that all the time. So that was really good fun, and as I say, thanks to ATIX for hosting us. There was a whole bunch of people. We had a day of hacking. There was cake. It was good fun. If you're interested in coming to see us at future events, we're going to be at DevConf India this weekend. So you can meet our Pune team there, and they're going to be running a booth. There'll be a demo. There's talks. All the details are on the forum. Check it out. And then at the end of August, we've got FrostCon, which is being mostly hosted by ATIX again. You guys are amazing, seriously. So that's going to be good fun as well. So again, there's going to be a booth there. You can come and chat with us and find out what we're all about if you don't already know. There are going to be more events later in the year as well, hopefully. So I'll put those up here as and when they're confirmed. But in the meantime, I'll just point out that you can get all of our upcoming events on the forum. So I'm going to skip on to our first presenter. So Tom wants to talk to us about Docker today, for a change.
Hello. Yeah, for a change. I didn't miss last demo. I had some problems with my development setup. Last demo, I was going to demo Docker pull unauthenticated, but since then, I've also added search to that as well. So we will get started. So as a reminder, I've set up lifecycle environments as sort of the encapsulating bucket, if you will, for managing the aspects of registry container images. I demoed in the past a way to set the name that you expose to the registry. You expose the images from the registry. And then new, added a feature where you can choose whether or not you want to enforce Docker login to get access to the images in the lifecycle environment. Here's just a couple little screenshots of 2 lifecycle environments that I have. One I've named development. And you can see that I've set unauthenticated pull as no. So you will, to get access to images in this repository, in this lifecycle environment, the user would need a Docker login and have permissions to see this specific lifecycle environment. And again, more as a reminder, the registry name pattern, in this case in the development, it's the product name / and then the upstream name, so the name at the registry that you synced it from. And then I have the production environment, and I've set authenticated pull to yes, unauthenticated pull to yes, which means that any user, whether they're logged in or not, can see and pull images in that environment. And the name in that environment I've just left as the original name. So again, sort of the model is that I've mirrored a external registry internally, and I'm moving a subset of those images through life cycles. And in the end, the production environment is going to be the one I expose to the world, to my internal world, my internal consumers. And again, this is sort of a reminder again, to use Docker login, you do need this, the user does need to have personal access tokens, view, create, and revoke. In this case, for this example, again, I've set permissions to view to the development lifecycle environment in a single organization. So let me just give a quick demo. So first I'm going to log in as the admin, and I'm going to search. You can see I'm doing Docker search. I'm piping it through grep just to colorize some words. So lots of images. I'm the admin. I see everything. You can see some of the crazy names in the library, for example. This is organization, lifecycle environment, product. Yeah, I don't know. This is crazy, right? So let's log in as someone else. We log in as developer. And I'm going to repeat the search. And you can see why I colorize it now. So in this case, the developer, when the developer's logged in, they can see some images. These are the original names, rel, rel7, etcd. But then you can also see the images that are in the development lifecycle environment. And this is the product name inserted into the path. So that's the registry name pattern. That's where it comes into play. And that's why I'm highlighting here. And then if I log out, registry, okay, and then I repeat my search. And when I'm not logged in at all, I only see the images that are in the production lifecycle environment, and the names I see, rather than being these ugly ones, are the originals from the upstream registry. And in my case, you know, I'm allowing developers to see Docker Hub, but when it gets to production, yeah, I'm not exposing any of those to the general users. You know, I'm only using the secure images from Red Hat. And that, in a nutshell, is unauthenticated pull and search. Pull works the same way, and that's it.
Cool, straightforward. I like it. Seems like a good step forward, particularly when you don't want to be storing secrets in your production systems, right? So, yeah, if you can possibly avoid it. So that seems like a really good thing to have. I'll just check for questions. Nope, no questions, at least for now. So hang around. Okay, so next up, Ido's going to talk to us a little bit about some internal changes. I'm curious here because I've not seen these changes. Right, I don't track pull requests at the same level that I used to, right? I just kind of look at features and stuff. So I'm really curious as to what's happened here. So for those of you who don't know, link to is just an internal system for generating things you can click on it, right? So what have you changed? Tell us all about
it. So the story starts like any other good story with a bug. I got a nasty bug, update remote execution has a new exception when it tries to generate a link. Small investigation of that caused me to realize that there is an issue with the way our override of link to works. What I did was, first of all, research how it's supposed to work and what's the issue, and I came up with a refactoring. As you can see, the code, if you know it or saw it in the past, it was much longer and with many more flaws inside. And one of the issues we had was that JavaScript and Mail2 Mail2 already had this exception. Also added the data ID, which caused an issue because we never passed the ID or the path in this case because it was JavaScript. So the original rewrite added the JavaScript to the part that we are not creating the data ID. So if you have anything that depends on data ID as a way to search in a query media, then please note that JavaScript will no longer will add the data ID to its reference. Furthermore, the refactoring is was a bit wider in that case, and I tried to make it a much more readable method, so it will be easier to maintain for a longer period of time and easier to understand what's going on. So if you have any questions or comments about it, I will be more than happy to answer it. And please make sure that your code doesn't depend on things that were changed, which is not adding the data ID to JavaScript links anymore. That's it.
Cool. Yeah, easy to introduce things like that when you start overriding core methods, right? So, I mean, the data ID thing, if I remember rightly, was added so that we could do better automation, right? So that every link has a thing you can detect within the source code of the page and check that it's either still there, it links to where it's supposed to, and all that kind of thing. So it's a good idea, but yeah, bugs. Okay, so cool. I don't see any questions for you. Sadly, that's the only two presenters we have today. So now you're gonna have to listen to me ramble on for a bit. So what I wanted to talk about is that it's now been 6 months since we moved, or actually at the start of this month, or start of last month, end of June, it was 6 months since we moved to Discourse. I think I mentioned this very briefly in a previous demo, but I didn't really go into any details. And I've had a little bit of time to sort of go and dig into the data that we can get from Discourse. And I wrote up a blog post about it, which I'm going to pull up right now because I stupidly forgot to load the page before the demo started. So I'm just going to get that right now, and then we can have a quick look at it. And I'm not going to say anything here that isn't already said in the blog post, but I just wanted to walk you guys through it a little bit in case you haven't had a chance to read it, and maybe you want to have a look at it from a different angle. So let me screen share to that. Okay, here we go. So this is the blog post. I'll make that a little bit bigger. There we go. So I'm not going to just read it out, right? That's boring. But what I did was I looked at two pieces of information. The first one was so let me step back. The question I'm trying to answer is: has Discourse been good for us? Right. So we had a discussion back in November that said the mailing list has a problem. I actually linked to the original graph up here. So this was a graph I drew in November. it's for the mailing list over all time. And what you can see is at this end here. So if I zoom in a little bit, this is on Imgur. Here we go. If you zoom into sort of January 16 or end of 2015 here, there's a general downward trend after that. So for about the last 2 years up to the end of 2017, it had not been good. Traffic was decreasing over time. So that was kind of the premise. It was like, we've got a problem. What are we going to do about it? And so we made the decision to move to Discourse, as I'm sure you all know. And so I wanted to look back over the first 6 months of this year and find out if that's been a reasonably good idea. And so I decided to take a look at two things. And the first one was simply the number of posts we get, which is what that first graph was showing you. But I also decided to look at the number of users, active users, that is to say the number of people who post at least once, right, within a given time period. And so that then tells you something about the width of your community, right? So the post gives you some idea of activity, but it could be one person generating 50 posts and talking to themselves. So if you include users in there, you get a better idea of what's going on. However, the data is somewhat skewed. So rather than looking at by day, which has some problems, if you think about the nature of our community, Saturdays are a really bad day, right? We pretty much always have 0 posts on a Saturday. It's the quietest day because neither so Tel Aviv and all the kind of that area who generally work Sunday to Thursday, they're not working on Saturday, and also the sort of Western side of things aren't really working on Saturdays either, so it's just quiet. And then Fridays and Sundays are kind of half activity, and so I thought, let's aggregate it by week. We get rid of all those problems. We should have enough data. So this is what it looks like when you aggregate it by week, which is slightly better distributed. It's still not perfect, but it's good enough. And then I thought, okay, I also want to be careful about time effects. So if you think about things like Christmas, you always have very low activity around Christmas. There'll be other periods of the year where that's also true. So rather than use the whole of 2017, because I do have data for the whole of 2017, I'll use the same 6 months, right? So we'll go January to June 2017, and we'll do January to June 2018. And that way you kind of try and take out these time-dependent effects as early as possible. So anyway, here is a couple of graphs. So I'm subsetting this by channel, so either Foreman users or Foreman dev. That's what the mailing list used to be called. Obviously, in Foreman and in Discourse, we call those support and development, but it's the same, basically the same channel. So an important note is this data does not include posts to any other category. So release announcements, events, the new blog category that we created, those are not included in this data. This is a straight one-to-one comparison between what would have gone to Foreman users and now goes to support, and the same for development. And so pink is 2017, blue is 2018, and it looks pretty good, right? This is Foreman. This is posts per week as a function of week number. So week number 1 is start of January all the way up to week 26, which is halfway through the year at the end of June. And it looks pretty nice. There's quite a lot of variability, particularly in the 2018 data. We see a lot wider variability in the number of posts per week, but overall, it's larger. And in fact, if you look at this from the point of view of the mean number of posts per week, actually, it's double, more than double in both cases. So there you go, and that one as well. So that's really, like, just straight on the face of it, that's a really good result, right? We're getting twice the number of posts per week that we were in 2017, and I need to go back and look at maybe 2015 and see if we've even exceeded those kind of levels, but I haven't had the chance to do that yet. Now, however, there is a problem, right? Because we talked a bit about users, and if you have more users, you would expect more posts. This is not a very interesting relationship, right? If you have more users, you've probably got more posts. So I wanted to try and account for that. And so here's the same graph again. I've just done 2018 because it gets a bit messy if you try and do the overlays. But here what I've done is I've put the size of the spot is the number of people who were active that week. So you can see, for example, right up here, we've got, you know, this huge, like 250 posts or 225 posts that week. But there are also like 60 plus active users that week. Whereas down here, yeah, now you expect similar things. You've got, you know, only 50 posts that week, but then only 30 people who were active, right? So there is clearly a relationship between the number of users and the number of posts, and we kind of have to take that into account. You know, this graph up here isn't massively interesting if all of that is being driven by just the number of users. And that, I mean, it's nice to know that the number of users is going up over time, right? That's a result in itself. That means we're growing the community, and I'm very happy about that. But I wanted to say something about the number of posts as well, because one of the things that we posited was that this would be good for the development community, and that it would be a really good thing for us to be having better tools to collaborate. You know, polls, and voting systems and the ability to have some cross-pollination, so users can more easily come into the development board to make comments when it suits them, whereas when you've got 2 mailing lists, there's a high barrier to entry. So I wanted to try and analyze that, and I did some calculations to show that that change in that double of the mean is not an accident, or it's very unlikely to be an accident. But then I came back down here and I did some new graphs down here. And what this is basically doing is I'm just modeling it by saying, let's try and account for the number of forum users, right? So I've done some statistical modeling here, and I'll gloss over the details for brevity. But basically what I'm plotting here, it's not quite the same as the modeling question. But what I'm doing is I'm dividing the number of posts by the number of active users. So, by the size of those data points in the previous graph. And what you can see is that for mostly, it's almost dead flat. Like it's basically well within the realms of chance that there's any slope at all on this graph. That you don't really see much change in the number of posts if you fix over time. Don't see much change in the number of posts over time if you fix the number of users to a fixed value. So for both groups in 2017, that was pretty much flat. In 2018, now that we're in Discourse, that's still true for the support category. So what we're really saying is that all of the growth in the number of posts in the support category is being driven by an increase in the number of users. Now that's good. That means more people are coming in. They're able to find the forum. They're able to get the help that they need, or hopefully get the help they need. Certainly they can ask their questions, and that's growing that part of the community. But what I find really interesting is this one here. This is the development board in Discourse. And this one isn't just driven by the number of users. So what this is saying is that if we fix the number of users, we still see an increase in number of posts over time. I did some calculations. It works out that you would expect to see an increase of around about 1 to 1.5 more posts per week, week on week, even if we didn't see any new users coming into the development boards. And so that tells us something along the lines of that we're talking more between ourselves, that there's more communication. It doesn't tell us much about the type of communication. We might all be arguing more, but I would say that this is probably a good thing overall, that we're communicating more, and that was something that we wanted to see coming out of this move to Discourse. So I was very pleased with this graph, and I give some numbers here, but what this is basically telling you is that because this number here is very low, that it's very unlikely that this is by chance, that there is only a 1% chance that you would see this slope of graph or higher in this situation. So basically it's not very likely, whereas these are all very high p-values, which basically means it's just random noise. And there's some more data and interpretations if you're interested in digging into that, or you want to check my working if you've got some statistical background yourself. I'd be very interested in your comments because I'm fairly new to doing this kind of analysis. So if I have missed something, I really want to hear about it. Yeah. Okay. So that was all I wanted to say about that. If you're interested in the details, go read the blog post. But that's kind of it. Ultimately, I think we all know. Everyone I've spoken to has the same feeling that the community seems more vibrant now that we've moved to a forum, and I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see that happening. That was my expectation. I'm glad that I'm not wrong, because it was a gamble, right? You can't really go back once you've done that. So I'm glad that it worked out. Okay, looking at the time, we're only sort of 20 minutes in. So I'm going to go on to one last topic, which is to talk, and it's a bit of an open discussion. So we've got Tom and Ido here. If anybody else wants to come and join in, ping me. I'll give you the presenter link. You can come and join in. I want to have a little bit of a chat about documentation. Two things have come up in the last 2 weeks, which I think are relevant. The first was a discussion about contributing to the documentation and whether or not people with access to core, that is, they can commit code to core in GitHub, whether that should automatically give them rights to commit to the website repo so that documentation can be kept in step. And the general consensus seems to have been that that's probably not a good idea, that that you should probably earn commit rights to the various types and qualities of repos that we have. Having commit access to core doesn't automatically get you commit access to a particular plugin, right? So why should the website be any different? But that got me thinking, and it got me thinking a little bit about whether the manual specifically, the part of the website that is tied to a particular release of Foreman, should in fact be somewhere else. we use a Jenkins job to build the website. It's literally git clone and Jekyll build, and then we push the resulting static files to the website. There's no reason why that Jenkins job couldn't pull from more than one repo and put the files in the right place before calling Jekyll build. Totally possible. And so it made me stop and think about whether it makes sense to have a situation where we do try and keep the documentation in the same place as the code. It could be part of the Foreman core repo, and we could just pull that subdirectory out quite easily as part of the build job. Or we could put it in a new repo that all core committers have access to. It's part of the core team. Any of these things is possible. So that was something I was thinking about. And then on top of that, Shim opened a poll this week about moving some of the wiki content to the manual, specifically the how to create a plugin documentation that we have on the Redmine wiki. And that started me thinking along the path of, well, do we make good use of the wiki? Is it particularly discoverable? Would it be better if we had something like a how-tos category within Discourse, which can also function as a wiki, right? We know we can have wiki posts there. That to me feel like there's no technical difference. Like if all you were doing was technical merits, there would be no reason to move it. But I feel like the discoverability in Discourse is much, much higher. Users can find are already there for support, whereas unless they're reporting a bug, they're never going to go to Redmine. So do we need to think about moving the wiki? Do we need that trade-off between it? You know, there's a very high barrier to contributing stuff to the manual, whereas a much lower barrier to contributing stuff to a wiki. So where does the line fall? Like, I'm all in favor of moving this how to create a plugin documentation into the manual, but there are other pages which are definitely more ad hoc, right? More kind of, I did this and it helped troubleshooting pages. Like our ERF pages that are auto-generated by the error handling code that Lukash did, all that time ago. So it's kind of an open discussion. I'm interested in people's thoughts about whether we can do documentation better. My gut feeling is that it's probably not worth the pain right now, but if other people feel more strongly, then I'm definitely open to making changes around this area, because I feel like the manual got out. Like, I think Tomer and Evad both found this recently. Like, they've been updating the manual for 1.19, and they've both found that actually there's pretty large sections of it that have gotten out of date and no one's really noticed. And that's kind of scary. And I feel like we should use that as a catalyst to think about whether we can get better contributions to the website. But I don't know the right way to do it. So yeah, I guess floor is open if anybody wants to comment on that. And we've only got you two here at the moment. We've got 10 people watching. If anyone's got comments, please fire them into the chat. What do you guys think?
Well, this is Tom. Personally, I am very biased in this area, and wikis are great on day one. And then day 2 through infinity, they just stagnate and grow old. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I have a solution, but and when I look up documentation, I'm often doing it by search. So I'll search if I have an issue, right? I'll search my email history, or I'll search at a specific site. So for example, on foreman.org, or on the Discourse site itself. So to me, that's the best source of documentation. If a search can lead me to current documentation, that would solve my, as a user story. Mm-hmm. So maybe it is a Discourse thread where the top post is the documentation, and then there's comments after it. Corrections, suggestions, questions, and then that's, someone can fold it back into the top post. That'd be maybe a way to keep things current.
Yeah, you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. So I think I can make 2 follow-ups to that. Firstly, you're absolutely right that things tend to stagnate. The problem is that applies to manuals just as much as wikis. The evidence is, the number of pull requests that have been opened by Tomer and they've had in the last week fixing things in the manual, I think is good evidence of that. Now, I don't have any numbers to say which one stagnates faster, but they'd certainly both have that problem. And my gut feeling says if you have a lower barrier to entry, people might fix it. It's not by far from guaranteed, but at least you don't have to go through the whole kind of check it out locally, or at least edit it within the GitHub UI, make a pull request. You can just fix it. And if someone spots a problem, they can then fix your fix, right? Wikis, in theory, are much quicker turnaround on that kind of thing at the cost of less review, right? So if it's important documentation, you don't go down that road, right? You don't want people to get defaced install instructions or whatever. So there's a balance there between like how much review do you need, how important is this document, and how fast does it change, versus how easy do you want it to be for people to contribute to it. And there's no right answer to that. However, the rest of what you've said is really interesting to me, because I think you're absolutely right. Firstly, you didn't mention Redmine as one of the places you'd search, which I think is telling. Mainly, I think I have to say, because Redmine search is terrible. It's really awful. And that applies to the wiki as much as it does to the bug tracker. So given that I certainly feel like Discourse's search is better, that's good. The second point is that the way you described it as a documentation in a post with comments and corrections afterwards is exactly what I had in mind. So there's two settings you can set within the latest version of Discourse. One is that you can have a category where everything is a wiki by default. So the RFCs category is like that. So you could easily create a how-tos category, or whatever you want to call it, just wiki, right? Whatever. But the second thing is that by default, Discourse will drop you to the most recent read post when you re-enter a thread, right? And for how-to documentation, that's super annoying. Because what you do is you read the how-to, you read the comments, and then you'll come back later and it'll jump you back like 10 posts down. It's a paper cut, right? You can hit home really easily, but it's a paper cut. And so you can there's actually now a setting in the latest version which says for this category, default to the top post every time instead of jumping to the bottom. And that's really good when you have like documentation categories. So it feels like the sort of subtleties and the niceness of putting that kind of thing on Discourse has some advantages over Redmine. And I think the stuff that's on Redmine that transfers well, I would be in favor of moving to Discourse. The real question in my head is where the line lies between what should be in some form of wiki, whether that's Redmine or Discourse to be decided, right? And what should be in the manual. And that really was brought into focus for me, because yeah, like the how to create a plugin document is really, really, really long, and that's not bad. That's fine, you know. That's just, it is what it is. But it's the sort of thing that changes quite rapidly, and I don't know how up to date that's being kept. And it's not easy to put comments on the documentation, right? Again, like you say, people providing corrections, contributions is much easier on a forum post, even if that first post is some kind of wiki, than it is on the website, because people have to go and find where to contribute it, right? Okay, yes, on just about every page of the website we have this little banner that says fork me on GitHub, but not many people actually do that. Most people don't consider themselves developers and aren't going to go and contribute via GitHub. Whereas if they're reading it on a forum and they're already logged in anyway, then it's like 10 seconds work for them to say, hey, this doesn't work for me. So yeah, I don't have any right answers. This is why I'm calling it an open discussion. I'm just kind of passing it around.
I have another idea, not to teach others, like additional. I see at the moment that many of our PRs are lacking of the story behind that PR. And I believe that we can add a story about what we wanted to achieve, how we approached it, and so on, and even create a bot or something like that can actually add it to a comment or something like that, even to Discourse. So it will be much easier to understand features, for example. It's not instead of documentation, but rather if we are working about a feature and something doesn't work or we don't understand properly, it's easier to realize following such story, for example. That type of feature, what was attempt to be achieved, and by doing that, I can even understand if this type of feature works for me or maybe it doesn't. So
yeah, fair enough. I think that's a different discussion, though, right? It's not really related to documentation.
It does, because it's not the documentation of okay, do the following step and you have Foreman installed, but rather, okay, we have a working Foreman, and now let's explain this type of screen or this type of configuration, so on. It's a bit.
Okay. The problem is that you're starting from a long way back, right? Because you'd need to create all of that for all of the existing functionality that we have as well, and that could take a while.
And actually, I thought more about the new count, because you cannot go to the past and change it. You can only, but you need a way to start with it, because if you will never start, it will never be at the end. So.
Well, that's true. I don't have any strong. I'm kind of doing hot take on this one because I've not really thought about this in depth, but it feels like, I think you're right that those stories should exist somewhere. Certainly the use case that you're trying to solve with a PR should be easily found for the person reviewing the PR, right? I think that's the most important statement, is that if you're going to review someone's PR, you have to know what you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, you can't assess whether or not this PR actually solves it, right? And so for me, it's not clear whether that should be part of the PR submission, like the first post on the PR itself, or at the very least like part of the original Redmine issue that it's fixing. But it feels like it should be in one of those two places, because I'm not convinced that but then the use case thing for Discourse is interesting. I guess my real problem with posting it to Discourse would be how do we present that, right? Because that's going to be a mess for users, right? If you've just got, let's say, a new category called user stories or whatever, and you put a new post in there every time you create a new feature in Foreman, that's fine, but it's a search nightmare. Like, a new user doesn't know what he's looking for, and these will not be ordered in any way. You could potentially tag them by version, but that sounds like a nightmare to maintain. And if I'm a new user, I've never seen Foreman before, I've got the basics up and running, what do I do now? I go and look in the user stories category, and all I've got is a list of titles. I don't even know what I want to search for yet, right? I'm not an experienced user. I'm not at the point of, I really need to do some Docker stuff. I'm like, what can it do? I'm not sure user stories is the way to discover that. It feels like that's more like walkthroughs and potentially videos. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything more to add to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, was there a question there for me?
No, not really. I used Docker at random because it caught my eye on your screen, but but no, I think I think I've come to the end of that thought process. It's like I like the idea of making sure user stories are available to reviewers. I'm not sure they help the new user. I don't know what you think about that.
I don't know. I mean, you consider it, an FAQ, right? Right. If you geared your stories to being the frequently asked questions, and maybe that's the top post, and it links to the documentation source. You still have the questions, in a thread, Discourse thread, and documentation could be still someplace else.
Yeah, could be. And I mean, then we get into a whole other debate about plugins and things, right? Because it's quite possible to add like scoring systems to Discourse categories, Stack Overflow style. So then, the most popular stuff does come to the top, right? But that relies on your users actually remembering to vote things up when they've finished using them, which in theory works fine. But I think it has some noise issues to begin with, certainly. I don't know. That's a bigger scope than I was really thinking about. Like my thoughts really about the manual itself and how it is today. It's not a bad idea. I need to think about it a bit longer because I'm a little concerned about the amount of fragmentation already between GitHub, Redmine, and Discourse. And like, if you start having to repeat yourself in multiple places, it gets really messy. So that is a concern, I think. I'm not saying it's unfixable. I think it is. But yeah, I was in a meeting recently that was showing off. It was a proprietary product. I have no intention of suggesting it here, but it was a bot basically that lives in chat channels and things. And they're targeting things like Stack Overflow, which means it would work perfectly well for Discourse as well, because it's the same kind of format. And it's a bot that basically learns FAQ stuff, and then if it sees the same questions coming up, it will reply straight away. And these things, it's not a new idea, but it was a nice implementation, and it got me thinking about this kind of stuff and how you generate FAQs, because the last thing you want to do is manually maintain it, right? But that said, we have an FAQ page on the Redmine wiki. It's not well maintained. I think it's very out of date. We have a troubleshooting page as well. No reason those would make excellent posts on Discourse, right? Because they're much easier to maintain and critically to comment on. So yeah, it's got potential. In any case, I think we've filled enough time, and nobody else seems to be commenting except the three of us anyway. So joy. So I think we'll wrap it up there. I might take some of these thoughts to Discourse itself and have a bit of a wider chat there in a little while, once I've had a chance to kind of flesh out exactly what I'm thinking about. But for today, I think we'll call it a day there. So thanks everyone very much for watching. You can find us in the usual places, on Freenode, on Mastodon, or Twitter, on YouTube, obviously. And in the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Do take care.